I sold everything I owned to live in paradise with her. I thought I was finally done running from the man I used to be, but the peace I was promised, it was just another cage. And by the time I saw it, I was already trapped. I was sitting on the balcony of a beachside café in Dumaguete, staring at the ocean like it owed me something. The sun was setting. Orange and pink bleeding into the water. Beautiful. Empty. Just like everything else in my life. I'd been in the Philippines 3 months by then. Sold my condo in Kelowna. Took early retirement from the telecom company. Told everyone I was living the dream. But the truth? I was just running. Running from the divorce that happened 8 years ago. Running from the silence of my apartment. Running from the man I saw in the mirror every morning who looked tired and done and alone. I thought maybe if I changed the scenery, I'd change too. But all I did was bring the same emptiness to a different beach. I ordered another coffee I didn't need. The waitress brought it over and smiled. I smiled back. She walked away. I stared at the cup. That's when she appeared. I didn't notice her at first. She was just another server weaving between tables. But then she stopped at mine. "You need more coffee already?" she asked. I looked up. She was young, mid-20s maybe, dark hair tied back, warm brown eyes, a smile that felt genuine, not the polite kind you give tourists, the kind that made you feel like you mattered. "I guess I do," I said. She laughed. Not loud, just enough to make me feel like I'd said something clever. She refilled my cup even though it was still half full. "You come here a lot," she said. "Every day this week. I like the view." "The ocean?" "Yeah, the ocean." She looked out at the water, then back at me. "Where are you from?" "Canada, Kelowna. It's in British Columbia." "I know where that is," she said. "Cold, right?" "Very cold. That's why you came here?" I nodded. Head slightly, like she was trying to figure me out. "What's the other part?" I didn't know how to answer that, so I just shrugged. Needed a change, I guess. "Well," she said, "the Philippines is definitely different from Canada. Is it warm all year?" "Mostly. We get typhoons sometimes. But yes, warm." "Good. I'm done with winter." She smiled again. This time it felt softer, like she understood something I hadn't said. "I'm Crizelle, by the way, Gordon." "Nice to meet you, Gordon from Kelowna." And just like that, she walked away. I watched her move between the tables. Confident, easy. I picked up my coffee and realized my hands weren't shaking anymore. For the first time in months, I felt something other than tired. I felt seen. I came back the next day, and the day after that. She was always there, always smiling. We'd talk for a few minutes between her tables. Small things. Where I was staying. How long I planned to be here. Whether I liked Filipino food. She asked questions, like she actually cared about the answers. Most people don't do that. Most people ask because it's polite. But Criselle? She listened. Really listened. And when I talked, she looked at me like I was the only person in the room. One afternoon, she sat down across from me during her break. She had a plate of lumpia, and she offered me one. I took it. It was good. She asked me what I did back in Canada. I worked in telecommunications. I said, 32 years. Retired last year. That's a long time. Yeah, it was. Do you miss it? No. She studied me for a second. Do you miss anything? I didn't know how to answer that either. So I just said, not really. That's sad, she said quietly. Maybe. She didn't push. She just ate her lumpia and watched the ocean. After a while, she said, I like talking to you, Gordon. You're not like the other foreigners here. What do you mean? Most of them just want one thing. You know what I mean? I knew exactly what she meant. I'd seen them. Older guys with girls half their age hanging on their arms. Guys who treated women like trophies or transactions. I wasn't that. I didn't want to be that. I'm not here for that, I said. I know, she said, and she smiled. Not flirtatious, just kind. That's why I like you. Something shifted in me. Something I hadn't felt in years. Like maybe I wasn't invisible anymore. Like maybe I mattered to someone. Even if it was just a waitress at a café by the beach. It felt like enough. We started talking every day. She'd sit with me after her shift ended. We'd walk along the seawall. She told me about her life. How her father left when she was 9. How her mother died 2 years ago from diabetes. How she lived with her Auntie Bing now in a small house near the market. How she was raising her younger brother Miko because there was no one else. She said she wanted to go to college, study nursing maybe, but she couldn't afford it. She worked 6 days a week just to keep the lights on. I'm sorry, I said one night as we sat on the wall watching the boats come in. For what? That you've had to deal with all that? She shrugged. It's just life, Gordon. Everyone has something. Yeah, but you're so young. You should be out having fun, not working all the time. Maybe, she said, but Miko needs me. Auntie Bing is getting older. Someone has to take care of things. I admired that. The way she carried it all without complaining. The way she still smiled even when things were hard. I'd spent years feeling sorry for myself because my wife left and I was lonely. But Criselle, she'd lost so much more and she was still standing, still fighting. It made me feel small. And it made me want to help. One night, she held my hand. We were sitting on the seawall. The sun had set and the sky was dark and full of stars. She just reached over and took my hand, gently. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't pull away. I didn't want to. Her hand was warm and small, and it felt like something I'd been missing without knowing it. You're different, Gordon, she said softly. How? You don't talk to me like I'm just here to serve you. You talk to me like I'm a person. You are a person. I know, but not everyone treats me that way. I squeezed her hand. You deserve better than that. She looked at me, really looked at me, and for a moment I thought maybe she was going to cry. But she didn't. She just smiled and said, "Thank you." That night I went back to my apartment and I couldn't stop thinking about her, about the way she looked at me. The way she made me feel like I wasn't just some retired guy killing time in a foreign country. She made me feel necessary, like I could be someone's hero again. And God, I wanted that. I wanted it so badly it scared me. I started paying for things. Small stuff at first. Dinner at a nicer restaurant. A new phone when hers cracked. She didn't ask for it. I just offered. And every time I did, she'd look at me with those big grateful eyes and say, "Gordon, you don't have to do this." But I wanted to. It felt good. It felt like purpose. Like I was finally doing something that mattered. Then one day she came to the cafe looking stressed. I asked her what was wrong. "It's Miko," she said. "His school fees are due and I don't have enough." "How much?" 15,000 pesos. I've been saving, but I'm still short. I did the math in my head. About 400 Canadian dollars. Nothing. I pulled out my wallet and handed her the cash. She stared at it. "Gordon, I can't take this." "Yes, you can. It's too much. It's for Miko, for his education. Take it." She started crying, right there in the cafe. She covered her face with her hands and her shoulders shook. I stood up and put my arm around her. She leaned into me. "No one has ever done this for us," she whispered. "It's nothing," I said. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. Because when she looked up at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Thank you," I felt like a man again. Like I had value. Like I wasn't just taking up space. We spent every evening together after that. She introduced me to her friends. They called me Kuya Gordon, Big Brother. They'd laugh and tease her and ask if I was her boyfriend. She'd blush and say we were just friends, but the way she looked at me didn't feel like friendship. It felt like something more, and I wanted it to be more. I wanted it so badly I could barely breathe. One night we were sitting in my apartment. I'd made spaghetti. She said it was good even though I knew it wasn't. We were drinking cheap wine and talking about nothing and everything. And then she got quiet. She looked at me across the table. "Gordon, can I ask you something?" "Of course." Do you ever get lonely? The question caught me off guard. I thought about lying, but I didn't. Yes, I said. All the time. She nodded slowly. Me too. You? But you're surrounded by people. That doesn't mean I'm not lonely. I didn't know what to say. So I just reached across the table and took her hand. She stood up, walked around to my side, and then she kissed me. Slow, soft, deliberate, like she meant it. I kissed her back. And for the first time in 8 years, I didn't feel alone. That night she stayed with me. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. I held her and she held me, and it felt like something had shifted. Like maybe I'd finally found what I was looking for. She fell asleep in my arms. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how fast things had changed, how just a few months ago I was sitting alone in Kelowna wondering what the point of any of this was, and now I was here, with her, and it felt like I'd been saved. But somewhere deep down, in a place I didn't want to look, I wondered if I was the one being saved, or if I was just convenient. Things moved quickly after that. She started staying over more, 3 nights a week, then 4, then almost every night. Auntie Bing didn't seem to mind. Criselle said her aunt liked me, said I was good for her. I met Miko one afternoon. He was 13, quiet, polite, didn't say much, just nodded when I asked him about school. Criselle said he was shy. I gave him some money for books. He smiled a little, said thank you in a voice so soft I barely heard it. I felt good about that, like I was helping, like I was making a difference. I started paying for more things, groceries for the house, medicine for Auntie Bing's arthritis, a new fan because theirs had broken. Criselle would thank me every time. She'd kiss my cheek and say I was too generous, but I didn't feel generous. I felt necessary, and that felt better than anything else. One night she asked if I ever got lonely anymore. No, I said. Not when I'm with you. She smiled and kissed me. Good, because you don't have to be lonely anymore, Gordon. I'm here. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Because if I didn't, what was I even doing? What was the point? How of any of this? But then things started to change, slowly. So slowly I didn't notice at first. She stopped asking how my day was. She'd come over and she'd be on her phone more, texting, smiling at messages I couldn't see. I'd ask who she was talking to and she'd say just a friend or just family. I didn't push. I didn't want to seem jealous, but I felt it. That little knot in my stomach that told me something was off. She started asking for more money. Not for herself, she said. For the house, for Miko, for Auntie Bing. The roof was leaking. The water bill was overdue. Miko needed new shoes. I said yes every time. Because what else was I going to do? Say no? Watch her struggle? I couldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. But she stopped sitting with me after work. She'd say she was tired, that she needed to go home early. I'd offer to walk her and she'd say no. It's okay. I'll take a tricycle. I started eating dinner alone again, staring at my phone, waiting for her to text. Sometimes she would, sometimes she wouldn't. And on the nights she didn't, I'd lie awake wondering what I'd done wrong. One night I went to the mall to buy groceries. I saw her. She was with a guy I didn't recognize, young, maybe late 20s. They were laughing. She touched his arm. He said something and she laughed again. My chest tightened. I walked over. She saw me. Her face changed. Just for a second. Surprise, maybe guilt. Then the smile came back. Gordon, she said brightly. What are you doing here? Shopping. Who's this? This is Lito, my cousin. Lito barely looked at me. He nodded. Said something in Visayan. Criselle laughed. I didn't know what he said. I smiled, shook his hand. It felt weak, disinterested. Nice to meet you, I said. Yeah, he said. And then he looked at Criselle and said something else I didn't understand. She replied in Visayan. They both smiled. I stood there feeling like an idiot. like I was interrupting something. I should go, I said. Okay, Criselle said. She kissed my cheek quickly. I'll see you later. Yeah, later. I walked away. I didn't look back, but I felt it. That sinking feeling. That voice in my head saying, you're losing her. You're losing her, and you don't even know why. That night she didn't come over. She texted me and said she was tired, needed to sleep at home. I said okay. I sat on my balcony and drank a beer and tried not to think about the way she'd touched Lito's arm, tried not to think about the way she'd laughed, like she was happy, happier than she ever seemed with me. I told myself I was being paranoid, that Lito really was her cousin, that I was just insecure, but the knot in my stomach didn't go away, it just got tighter. I met a guy named Darren a few days later, British, early 50s, lived in Dumaguete for 6 years. We got to talking at a bar near the waterfront. He asked if I was living here full time. Yeah, I said. Retired. How long? 3 months. He nodded, took a sip of his beer. Got a girlfriend yet? I hesitated. Yeah, sort of. He smiled, not in a happy way, in a way that made me uneasy. How long you been with her? 4 months. You paying for her family yet? The question hit me like a slap. I stared at him. A little. He laughed. Not mean. Just sad. Tired. Yeah. That's how it starts. What do you mean? He leaned back in his chair. I was with a girl here. 3 years. She was sweet. Funny. Made me feel like I mattered. I paid for everything. Her family. Her brother's school. Her mom's hospital bills. Her cousin's wedding. Her sister's baby. It was always something, always urgent, always necessary. And I kept giving because I thought she loved me. I thought I was helping. What happened? My pension was late 1 month. Just 1 month. I told her I'd have the money in 2 weeks. She disappeared. Didn't answer my calls. Didn't come by. I went to her house. Her mom said she wasn't there. A week later, I saw her at a mall with another foreigner, older than me, richer probably. She saw me, didn't even look surprised, just smiled and waved like we were old friends. That was it. 3 years. Gone. I felt sick. I'm sorry. Don't be. I was stupid. I wanted to be the hero. I wanted to believe someone needed me. And she knew that. She used it. Crizelle's not like that. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, yeah, that's what I said too. I left the bar angry, not at Darren, at myself. Because part of me knew he was right. Part of me had known all along, but I didn't want to admit it. I didn't want to be the guy who got played. I didn't want to be that pathetic. So I told myself Criselle was different, that what we had was real, that Darren just had bad luck. But I couldn't stop watching her. Couldn't stop noticing the little things. The way she checked her phone constantly. The way she'd smile at messages and then close the screen when I walked by. The way she stopped asking me about my day. Stopped touching me unless I touched her first. Stopped looking at me like I mattered. One night I couldn't take it anymore. I asked her directly, Criselle, do you love me? She looked up from her phone. What? Do you love me? Or do you just need me? Her face changed. Gordon, why would you ask that? Because I need to know. Of course I love you. Do you? She put her phone down, stood up. Her eyes were wet. How can you say that? After everything we've been through? I just need to hear it. I'm here, aren't I? I'm with you. What more do you want? I want to know you're here because you want to be. Not because I'm paying for your life. She looked at me like I'd slapped her. Is that what you think? That I'm using you? I don't know what to think anymore. She started crying, real tears, shoulders shaking, hands covering her face. I felt like a monster. I stepped toward her. Criselle, I'm sorry. I didn't mean. You think I'm just like everyone else, she said through her tears. You think I'm some poor girl who's trapping you. You're just like all the other foreigners. You think we're all the same. That's not what I think. Then why would you say that? Because I'm scared. She looked up at me. Of what? Of losing you. She wiped her eyes, stepped closer, put her hands on my chest. You're not going to lose me, Gordon. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I pulled her into my arms, held her tight. She held me back, and I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe it so badly it hurt. That night we had sex. But it felt different, mechanical, like she was going through the motions, like she was performing. I tried not to think about it, tried to just be present, but I couldn't. I kept wondering if she was thinking about someone else, if she was wishing I was someone else. When it was over, she rolled onto her side and went to sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling emptier than I had before. A week later, I checked my bank account. I'd sent her 80,000 pesos in 2 months. I hadn't even been keeping track. It just kept disappearing. 1,000 here, 5,000 there, 10,000 for this, 15,000 for that. I tried to remember what it all went to. Groceries, medicine, rent, utilities, school fees. It all sounded reasonable. But 80,000 pesos? That was over 2,000 Canadian dollars. In 2 months, I made a list in my head, tried to do the math. It didn't add up, not quite, but I didn't want to ask, because if I asked, it meant I didn't trust her. And if I didn't trust her, what were we doing? But I couldn't let it go. The next time I saw her, I asked, as gently as I could, Criselle, I need to ask you something. Okay, the money I've been giving you, what's it all going to? Her face hardened. Are you serious right now? I just want to understand. Understand what? That I'm poor? That my family needs help? You already know that, Gordon. I'm not saying that. You just what? You want an itemized list? You want receipts? You want me to prove I'm not stealing from you? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I didn't know how to answer. Because that's exactly what I meant. And she knew it. Her eyes were cold now, angry, hurt. If you don't trust me, she said slowly, then maybe we shouldn't be together. My chest tightened. Don't say that. Why not? It's true, isn't it? You think I'm using you. You think I'm just here for your money. I don't think that. Yes, you do. Criselle, please. She stared at me, waiting. I felt the panic rising in my throat. The fear of losing her, of being alone again, of going back to that empty apartment with nothing but silence and regret. I couldn't do it. I couldn't lose her. So I did the only thing I could think of. I pulled out my wallet, handed her 10,000 pesos. Here, I said. I trust you. I'm sorry. Please don't leave. She looked at the money, then at me, and something in her face softened. She took the money, folded, take it carefully, put it in her purse. Then she stepped forward and kissed my cheek. Thank you, Gordon, she said quietly. I know this is hard for you, but I promise I'm not using you. I care about you. I really do. I nodded, tried to smile, but inside I felt something break. Because I'd just bought her forgiveness. I just paid her to stay, and we both knew it. After that, things got worse. She stopped coming over as much. She'd make excuses. Say she was tired. Say Auntie Bing needed her. Say Miko was sick. I'd offer to come to her place and she'd say, no, it's too messy. I'll come to you tomorrow. But tomorrow would come and she wouldn't show. She'd text me late at night, say she was sorry, say she'd make it up to me. But she never did. I started calling her more, texting her more, asking where she was, what she was doing, who she was with. She'd answer sometimes, other times she wouldn't. I'd lie awake at night staring at my phone, refreshing the screen, waiting for the little dots. That meant she was typing. But they wouldn't come, and I'd feel insane, like I was losing my mind, like I was becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone desperate, someone pathetic. One night I drove to her house. It was late, past 11. I just wanted to see her, to talk to her, to make sure she was okay. Auntie Bing answered the door. She looked surprised, maybe a little annoyed. "Criselle?" I asked. She shook her head, said something in Visayan I didn't understand. Then she closed the door. Not slammed it, just closed it, gently, like I wasn't worth the energy of a fight. I stood there for a minute, staring at the door, feeling like an idiot. Then I got back in my car and drove home. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on my balcony and drank beer and watched the sun come up. 3 days later, she stopped answering my calls completely. I texted her, asked if she was okay, if I'd done something wrong, if we could talk. Nothing. Just silence. I waited outside the cafe during her shift. She didn't show up. I asked one of the other servers where she was. The girl just shrugged and said she didn't know. I felt crazy, like I was stalking her, but I couldn't stop. I needed to know. I needed to understand what had happened, what I'd done to make her disappear. On the 4th day, she finally texted me. Just 3 words. "I need space." I stared at the message, read it over and over, trying to make sense of it. Space from what? From me? Why? I texted back immediately. "Can we talk, please?" The dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then finally her response. "You're smothering me, Gordon. I need time to think." Smothering her? I felt like I'd been punched. I wrote back, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I just miss you." No response. I waited an hour, then another. Then I wrote again, "Please, just tell me what I did wrong." Still nothing. I called her. It went straight to voicemail. I called again. Same thing. I felt my hands shaking, my chest tight. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I just needed to see her, to talk to her, to fix whatever I'd broken. I drove to her house again. It was afternoon. The sun was hot and brutal. I knocked on the door, waited, knocked again. Finally, Auntie Bing opened it. She looked tired, frustrated. She said something sharp in Visayan. I didn't understand, but I got the message. "Go away." I didn't care. "I need to see Criselle," I said. She shook her head, started to close the door. I put my hand on it. Not aggressive, just desperate. "Please," I said, "just let me talk to her." She stared at me. Then she turned and called into the house. I heard footsteps, and then Criselle appeared. She looked annoyed, maybe a little scared. She stepped outside and closed the door behind her. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I needed to see you. I told you I need space." "Why? What did I do?" "You didn't do anything, Gordon. I just need time." "Time for what?" She sighed, crossed her arms. "To figure out what I want." "What does that mean?" "It means I don't know if this is working." My heart dropped. "Don't say that. It's true." "Why?" "Because I care about you? Because I want to see you? Because you're too much? You're always calling, always texting, always asking where I am and what I'm doing. It's exhausting. I'm just trying to be there for you." "No, you're trying to control me. That's not fair." She looked at me like I was a child. "Maybe not, but it's how I feel." I didn't know what to say. I felt like I was drowning, like everything I'd built was falling apart, and I couldn't stop it. "Can we just talk?" I asked quietly. "Please." She hesitated. Then she said, "Maybe next week." "Next week? I need time, Gordon." "I already told you." Okay. Next week." She nodded, turned to go back inside. I grabbed her hand. She looked down at it, then up at me. "I love you," I said. She pulled her hand away, gently. "I know." Then she went inside and closed the door. I stood there for a long time, staring at nothing, feeling nothing. Then I got in my car and drove home, and I didn't hear from her for 3 more days. On the 3rd day, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to her house again. I didn't care if I was being crazy. I didn't care if I was smothering her. I just needed to know the truth. I needed to hear it from her mouth, that it was over, that I'd lost her, that I'd failed again. When I got there, I saw him, Lido, walking out of the house. He was smiling, laughing about something. He got on a motorcycle and drove away. I sat in my car, staring, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Then I got out, walked to the door, knocked. Hard, Criselle answered. She looked surprised, then annoyed. Gordon, who is he? What? Lido, who is he really? I told you, my cousin. Why was he here? Because he lives nearby. He visits sometimes. Don't lie to me. Her face hardened. I'm not lying. Then why won't you see me? Why do you have time for him but not for me? Because you're suffocating me, she shouted. Because every time I turn around, you're there asking me questions and demanding answers and making me feel like I owe you something. I just want to understand. There's nothing to understand. I needed space. I told you that. Is there someone else? She stared at me. What? Is there someone else? Are you seeing him? He's my cousin, Gordon. Are you seeing someone else? She didn't answer right away. And in that silence, I knew. I knew before she even opened her mouth. It doesn't matter, she said finally. It does to me. She looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time, I saw her clearly. Not the girl I'd built up in my head, not the sweet waitress who made me feel young again, but the woman she actually was, tired, calculating, surviving. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't evil. She was just doing what she had to do. And I was convenient. I was safe. I was useful. Until I wasn't. Did you ever love me? I asked. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, I needed you, Gordon. And you needed to be needed. Isn't that enough? I felt something inside me shatter. Not violently, just quietly, like glass breaking under water. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood there, staring at her, at this stranger I'd given everything to. No, I said. It's not. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me with something like pity. Then she stepped back inside and closed the door. I stood there for a minute, maybe two. Then I walked back to my car, got in, and drove away. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. I didn't see her again after that. I didn't try to. I moved to Cebu a week later, found a cheap apartment near the port, quiet, anonymous, no expats, no cafes, no beaches, just me and the noise of the city. I stopped going out, stopped talking to people. I just existed, got up, ate, slept, repeat. I told myself I was healing, but really I was just hiding from the truth, from the shame, from the fact that I'd been so desperate to feel wanted that I'd let myself be used. And I'd known. Somewhere deep down, I'd known the whole time. But I didn't care, because being used felt better than being alone. One Sunday I was walking past a church. I don't know why I stopped. I'm not religious. Haven't been since I was a kid. But something made me walk inside. It was empty. Just a few old women in the front pews and a priest standing near the altar. He saw me. Nodded. I sat down in the back, stared at the cross on the wall, tried to feel something. Anything. But there was nothing. Just that same hollow emptiness I'd been carrying since Kelowna. After a while, the priest walked over. Older guy, maybe 65, friendly face. He sat down next to me. You okay? He asked. Yeah, fine. He didn't believe me. I could tell, but he didn't push. He just sat there, quiet. After a while, he said, I'm Father Romy. Gordon, you're not from here. No, Canada. Ah, long way from home. Yeah. We sat in silence for a minute. Then he said, you look like a man carrying something heavy. I almost laughed. That obvious? I've been doing this a long time. You get good at reading faces. Well, you're not wrong. You want to talk about it? I thought about saying no, about standing up and walking out, but I didn't. Instead, I said, I came here to escape. Thought I could be someone different here, someone better, but I just brought all my old shit with me. And I made it worse. How so? I fell in love with someone who didn't love me back, and I knew it. I knew the whole time, but I didn't care, because feeling used was better than feeling nothing. Father Romy nodded slowly. You're not the first person to tell me that. Yeah? Not even close. Loneliness makes us do strange things, makes us accept things we shouldn't, makes us lie to ourselves because the truth is too painful. So what do? He looked at me. You stop running. From what? From yourself. You can't escape who you are, Gordon. You can move to the other side of the world. You can fall in love with 100 people. But until you face the man in the mirror and make peace with him, you'll keep ending up right back here, sitting in an empty church, wondering where it all went wrong. I felt something crack open inside me. Not painful, just real. I don't know how to do that. Nobody does. But you start by being honest with yourself about why you came here, about what you were really looking for, and about whether you found it. I sat there for a long time, thinking, and then I said it out loud. The thing I'd been avoiding since the day I landed in Manila. I didn't come here to find love. I came here because I didn't want to feel empty anymore. And I thought if someone needed me, I'd matter again. But I was wrong. She didn't need me. She needed my money. And I knew that. I knew it, and I stayed anyway. Because being used felt better than being invisible. Father Romy put his hand on my shoulder. That's a hard thing to admit. Yeah, but it's the truth. And the truth is where healing starts. I looked at him. So what now? Now you decide. Do you keep running, or do you stay? And if you stay, who are you going to be? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But for the first time in months, I felt like maybe I could find one. Not today. Maybe not even this year, but someday. And that was enough. I left the church that day feeling lighter. Not happy, not healed, just lighter. Like I'd finally put down something I'd been carrying for too long. I thought about Criselle sometimes. Wondered if she thought about me. Probably not. I was just another foreigner who'd paid her bills for a while. Another name on a long list of men who thought they could save her. And maybe that was okay. Maybe she didn't need saving. Maybe she was doing just fine. Better than me, probably. I thought about going home. Back to Kelowna, back to the cold. But I didn't. Not yet. Because even though I'd failed here, even though I'd made a fool of myself, there was still something about this place that felt right. Like maybe I hadn't come here for love. Maybe I'd come here to lose something. To break myself down so I could build myself back up. Different. Better. Honest. I'm still here. Still in Cebu. Still alone. I don't go to cafes anymore. Don't chase young women who smile at me. Don't try to be anyone's hero. I just live. Quietly. Simply. I wake up. I go for walks. I eat. I read. I watch the city move around me. And sometimes, late at night, I sit on my balcony and I think about everything that happened. About Gordon, the lonely retiree who thought he could buy love in a foreign country. About Krizelle, the survivor who did what she had to do to keep her family afloat. And I realized we were both just playing our parts. I was the fool. She was the survivor. And in the end, we both got what we needed. She got money. I got a lesson. A painful, expensive, humiliating lesson. But a lesson all the same. I don't hate her. I don't even blame her. She was honest in her own way. More honest than I was. She told me what she needed, and I gave it to her. Because I needed something too. I needed to feel necessary. I needed to feel like I mattered. And for a while, I did. Even if it was a lie. Even if it was built on transactions and desperation and loneliness. For a few months, I mattered to someone, and that was more than I'd had in years. But now I know the truth. You can't buy meaning. You can't buy love. You can't pay someone to care. And you can't run away from yourself, no matter how far you go, no matter how warm the weather is, no matter how many smiles you get from strangers in cafes. At the end of the day, you're still you. And until you make peace with that, you'll never be free. So that's what I'm doing now. Making peace with the divorce, with the loneliness, with the choices I made, with the man I am. It's slow. It's hard. Some days I still feel that hollow ache in my chest, that voice that says you're not enough, you never were, you never will be. But I'm learning to live with it, learning that being alone doesn't mean being empty, that needing people doesn't make you weak, that failing doesn't make you worthless. It just makes you human. I don't know what's next. Maybe I'll stay here. Maybe I'll go home. Maybe I'll find someone else someday, someone real. Someone who sees me and chooses me, not because I'm useful, not because I'm convenient, but because I'm enough, just as I am, broken, lonely, imperfect, human. Or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll spend the rest of my life alone, and maybe that's okay too, because at least now I'm alone with myself, not running, not hiding, not pretending, just here, present, real. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all it ever needed to be. I thought moving to the Philippines would save me. I thought it would fix everything that was broken inside. But it didn't. It destroyed the illusion, the fantasy, the lie I'd been telling myself. And in its place, it left something harder but truer. The knowledge that I can't be saved by a place, or a person, or a purpose. I can only be saved by myself, by choosing to stop running, by choosing to face the man in the mirror, by choosing to live with the emptiness instead of running from it. And that's what I'm doing now, one day at a time, one breath at a time, learning to live with Gordon, the real Gordon, not the hero, not the savior, not the man I wished I was, just the man I am. And maybe someday, that'll be enough.